President Obama yesterday played some kiss and make up and said shalom to Bibi Netanyahu in the Oval Office. Here's a little look of what they had to say.
There are going to be times where, he and I are having robust discussions about what kind of choices need to be made. But the underlying approach never changes, and that is the United States is committed to Israel's security. We are committed to that special bond.
Rick, it's never a good sign when you have a meeting with the leader and all you're talking about is a special bond and a special relationship. That's really what the big focus was yesterday. Now it's time for our post-politics segment with Dan Balz of the Washington Post, of course. Dan, thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here.
So let's start off with this Medicaid recess appointment. You heard us just talking about the idea of transparency. You know, the White House clearly is frustrated. They want to get this through. They're trying to squeeze this in while Congress is out. Does this ding that record and their posturing that we're trying to do things differently?
Sure, it does ding it to some extent, and I think it's it's the reality of trying to govern in an environment that they thought they were going to be able to change more significantly than they've been able to do. And so at that point, then they come up against the question, well, what do we do in this environment? And I remember talking to people early on in the administration that ultimately the issue that they knew that Democrats and President Obama in 2012, the standard they'll be held to is how much did they get done on the big problems? And so they obviously see this appointment as important in implementing the Health Care Reform Act, and they went ahead and did it, knowing that they would probably take some kind of a hit.
Right, because there's no bones about it. This is about political opposition. They knew that this was going to be a big bloody fight, that basically Republicans would relitigate the health care debate and do it in a not so flattering light if they tried to get him through the front door.
Right, and the last thing they want to do is re-raise the health care issue in that way.
Right.
I mean, they feel
talking about rationing.
They feel that at this point, bit by bit, slow as it may be, they are seeing some improvement in public attitudes towards their Health Care Reform Act. If they got into this kind of a debate, it would inflame that issue in a way that would be detrimental to them.
Speaking of inflaming immigration reform, we have the lawsuit now. It's out there. The language very strong on both sides. Clearly, where do you see the political impact? I mentioned at the top Western Democrats who realize that the politics of immigration doesn't fit neatly along party lines. They're put in a bit of a tough spot here, I've got to think, to have the Obama administration stand against a pretty popular law in Arizona.
I thought you were right on. This is a double-edged sword, obviously. There is obviously popular support for what Arizona has done. There is also a political cost to Democrats potentially within the Latino community if they don't move against it, if they don't stand up for that side of it. So in many ways they were forced to do this. They obviously believe that the law is a bad law, but there's a political imperative to do it as well. But as you suggest, there is a downside in some areas, and Western Democrats in particular are going to be much more squeamish about taking on this fight than are some Democrats in other parts of the country.
Mm-hmm. So how does that actually affect then the conversations that are happening in Washington between the White House and Capitol Hill about the way forward on immigration reform? I mean,
well, it was just a week ago that the president addressed immigration for the first time in his presidency or as president. Nobody at that point believed that that was anything more than a speech that was not going to lead to any real action. I don't think we've changed on that. I think the conversation here will continue to be pretty soft and pretty minimal, and that the debate will be in the context of campaigns.
Briefly, I want your take on the meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu yesterday. It was about the photo op in large part. Did they get what they needed out of this, do you think?
Well, this is a process that ebbs and flows, and there had been enough problems that had built up that they needed to do this, which was a minimum step. But it seemed to me that it was the step that they had to take, and they were able to pull it off reasonably well. The issue is really going to be whether they are able to have direct talks, whether there's some negotiations that actually begin. We don't know, given the history that's happened during this administration. You would still be a skeptic to say things are going to go smoothly on that. But I think this was the minimum necessary they had to do to try to move then to the next level.
And I love watching the president walk the prime minister out to his limo at the end. It was just a
Thanks for coming.
You don't see that very often.
After leaving him behind.
That's right. I'll wait for your card to leave. It was very nice.
Waving goodbye.
Dan Balz from the Washington Post. It's Post Politics. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. That does it for this edition of Top Line. We'll be back here tomorrow, noon Eastern. In the meantime, twitter.com/thenote. And I've got visions of Joe Arpaio on a